I hadn't seen my dad in 4.5 years, maybe more if you count the time we spent pretending we didn't have the same blood. When I walked into that lawyer's office, glass walls, chrome corners, air too cold to be welcoming, he looked up like I'd tracked dirt across a carpet that cost more than my apartment's annual rent. He didn't say anything. Just leaned back in his chair with that signature frown, arms folded like he was about to deliver one of his infamous lectures. Elise, my older sister, didn't even glance at me. She sat there scrolling through her phone, her legs crossed too. Perfectly, her lip gloss unbothered. That curl at the edge of her mouth? Yeah. I knew that one. It was the same one she gave me at 13 when I brought home a C in math and she aced calculus. Everything in that room buzzed like a wasp nest waiting to crack open. Mrs. Callahan, gray suit, pinched mouth, glasses low on her nose, was the only one who acknowledged me, and even then, it was more out of obligation than warmth. She'd been our family's lawyer since I was 10, back when Gran still made Sunday dinner and Dad still pretended he loved being a father. No one asked where I'd been. No, how was Japan? Not even a, you made it back safe. It was like I'd stepped out of a void instead of a plane. But I didn't come for them. I came because Gran made me promise. No matter what, she'd said, her hand cool and papery in mine, be there when they read it. So I showed up. Kept my word, even if they never kept theirs. Mrs. Callahan cleared her throat and opened a leather folder like it held blueprints for a bomb. The room felt too still, too rehearsed, like everyone had practiced how they'd pretend to be surprised. To Elise Kane, she began, her voice flat as a file cabinet, the family cabin in Asheville and Evelyn Kane's record collection. Elise's eyebrows twitched, just barely, but she didn't look up from her phone. I knew her tells. That flicker meant she was expecting more, probably the company. Or the house. Or both. Mrs. Callahan flipped to the next page, to Victor Kane, a $15,000 donation to the Raleigh Historical Society in his name. And Evelyn's book collection. Dad actually laughed. One short, sharp breath through his nose like someone had told him the punchline to a joke he didn't like. His knuckles whitened on the armrest, but he didn't say anything yet. Then came mine, and to Lila Kane, my granddaughter, my heart, Mrs. Callahan read, and I felt the room contract. I leave the entirety of my estate. All financial assets. The Raleigh house, and full ownership of Kane Realty Holdings. Effective immediately. For a second, the silence was almost peaceful. Then I heard the soft thud of Elise's phone slipping an inch down her thigh. Dad's jaw flexed like he was chewing on the word unfair. Mrs. Callahan slid a letter across the table toward me. I reached for it slowly, trying not to flinch. My fingers brushed the paper. The envelope was thick, heavy, official. Not a check, not a friendly note. Just a notarized transfer. 42,300,000. I didn't speak. Couldn't, really. My throat was tight, like something sacred had landed in my lap and I wasn't sure I was worthy of it. Dad, though, he reacted. Of course he did. The second the paper hit the table, he grabbed it like it had insulted him personally. Didn't even look at me. You think this makes you one of us again, he said, low and sharp. The words were razors. Then, in front of everyone, he pulled a pen from his blazer pocket, like he'd planned this, and scribbled over Gran's signature. Not just a line through it. He obliterated it. Scribbled like a madman and then tore the document in half. The pieces floated down like snow, soft and brutal. Elise gasped, finally off her phone. Mrs. Callahan didn't flinch. I got the feeling she'd seen worse in that office. You walked away, Lila, Dad said, pointing at me like I was a stain. You don't get to waltz back in and take everything. I didn't move. Didn't yell. Just sat there, one hand in my lap, the other resting inside the pocket of my coat where the weight of Gran's package pressed against my hip. Brown paper. Folded small. Taped shut. Given to me over pie and coffee in a diner off I-40, 2 months before she died. Keep this safe, she'd said. Don't open it unless they try to take it all. They had. So I would. Elise started muttering something about contesting the will. Dad demanded a full review. Mrs. Callahan simply noted their objections without blinking. Meanwhile, I kept still. My fingers closed around the edges of the package in my coat. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just felt its weight, solid and secret, like Gran had tucked a piece of her spine inside and told me to grow one. They thought they'd won something by tearing up a piece of paper. But they didn't understand Gran, not really. That woman didn't gamble on chance. She played for keeps. I left without saying a word. No slam door, no screw you, no mic drop, just the soft click of my sneakers across the polished floor and the weight of a promise in my coat pocket. Outside, the parking lot was slick from earlier rain, and the magnolia tree by the entrance caught my eye. I used to hide under it when I was little, when Dad's lectures got too long, or Elise wouldn't let me play with her and her friends. I'd sit with my knees pulled up, scraping bark into my palms just to feel something. He used to say I'd never amount to anything unless I followed his path. Real estate. Suits. Cold calls. Men with cigar breath and fake handshakes. I didn't want any of that. I wanted peace. I wanted space. So at 22, I packed my life into 2 suitcases and flew to a corner of Japan where no one gave a damn about the name Kane, but Gran? She called every month. Asked about the kids I taught, the food I ate, the snow that fell. Like ash on the rooftops. Never judged. Just listened. That was love, I think. The quiet kind. My apartment smelled like leftover curry and unresolved ambition. The leaky faucet in the kitchen still hadn't stopped its slow, accusatory drip. I left it. Couldn't deal with it just yet. The package sat on the passenger seat the whole ride home, untouched. Every time I glanced at it, my fingers twitched like they wanted to reach across and rip it open with my teeth, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself a glass of tap water, still tasting faintly like metal, and stood by the window, watching the street like it might answer something. Same old Raleigh, uneven pavement, a neighbor's pit bull barking at leaves, a busted streetlight blinking like it was trying to send Morse code. My chest felt tight. Not from the inheritance, not even from Dad's outburst. It was something else. Something colder. I finally turned toward the package. It was smaller than I remembered. Brown paper, edges creased like it had been folded over and over again by hands too careful to trust the world. The tape was yellowed at the corners. I ran my thumb along the seam, and for a second, I just stood there staring at it, like maybe Gran's ghost was waiting inside. I didn't say anything out loud. I just opened it. Inside was a sheet of paper, one of those legal-size ones with the thick watermark you can only get through notaries and serious people. And a USB drive. Plain black. No label. I read the paper first. My hands were shaking. It was a trust agreement. Different from the one Mrs. Callahan had read aloud, though the numbers matched. 42,300,000. But this one wasn't ceremonial, it was active. Executed. Notarized. Bank account details listed. The last 4 digits? 0927. Gran's birthday. Of course, she knew I'd checked. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out and sat down hard in the creaky chair by the dining table, the USB still in my hand. I plugged it into my laptop. His slow, secondhand, the key missing since last fall. No password. Just a folder labeled Lila. My name. I clicked. Inside were PDFs, scans, some property deeds, a few letters between Gran and Mrs. Callahan. A draft of her will, even more generous than the one that made Dad nearly combust. I was halfway through an old spreadsheet, something about asset breakdowns, when I thought I should check the account. Just to see if it's real. So I opened my banking app, typed in my login. Slowly. Carefully, the screen froze, then, account not found. I stared. Blinked. Tried again, same message. My mouth went dry. I rubbed my face, checked the email I used for the account. Password reset? Nothing. I called the bank, took forever to get a human. When I finally did, the woman on the line sounded like she was one more rude customer away from quitting on the spot. Name, she asked, Lila Kane. Long pause. Clicking of keys. I'm sorry, Miss Kane, but our system lists your account as inactive. What? My voice cracked. I was just in it last week. Another pause. It's marked, deceased. Certified by the county. 2 weeks ago. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The call dropped or I hung up. I honestly don't know. I just remember sitting there, the USB warm in my palm, the word deceased echoing around the room like it had climbed inside the walls. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. My family, my blood, had erased me. I didn't cry. I sat there. Watched the rain begin to streak down the window like something out of a sad movie. The city didn't stop. Car horns still blared, sirens still passed. But inside my apartment, it was just me and the dull hum of my laptop fan, spinning as if it could cool the fire in my throat. I was legally dead. A typo in the system. A phantom with no bank account, no existence, no voice. It didn't make sense. And yet, it did. Dad's face, twisted, cold, came back to me. Elise's eyes sliding away as he tore the letter. The silence in the lawyer's office. This wasn't rage. It wasn't even revenge. It was strategy. They were making it so I couldn't fight. If I didn't exist on paper, I couldn't inherit. I couldn't challenge anything. I couldn't even get utilities in my name. They weren't trying to cut me out, they were trying to bury me. I opened the USB folder again, digging deeper this time. One email stood out. From Gran to Mrs. Callahan. Dated 3 months before she passed. Subject line, contingency. If they try to block Lila, Gran wrote, use the secondary vault. She'll know where to look. I didn't, not really. But somewhere in the dusty attic of my memory, a light flickered. Langford, when I was a kid, Gran used to talk about it like it was a dragon's den. Langford Security. No address, just a place she trusted with real valuables. She had a box there, box 22, I think, and then it hit me. My desk drawer. The little brass key. I'd almost thrown it away when I moved back from Tokyo, but something about it had felt sacred. I found it tucked inside an old postcard from Kyoto. For emergencies, she'd said, slipping it into my hand at 18. Like she was passing on a secret spell. Langford, box 22. My pulse kicked up. I stood too fast, nearly knocking over the chair. I didn't even put on proper shoes. Just grabbed my jacket, shoved the USB and trust paperwork into my bag, and headed for the door. The rain had picked up, the streets slick and shining. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield as I drove, hands tight on the wheel. My wipers squeaked like they were protesting every move. Langford wasn't downtown. It was in a stretch of the city people mostly forgot, a gray cinderblock building squashed between a pawn shop and a laundromat that always smelled like wet socks and bleach. The kind of place nobody asked questions. I buzzed in. A woman in her 60s with a tight bun and zero interest in my backstory opened the door with a grunt. Key, she said. I handed it over. She checked a clipboard. Nodded. No small talk. The hallway she led me down felt like a freezer. Fluorescent lights flickered above, and the echo of our footsteps was the only sound. We stopped at a steel door, and she punched in a code. Box 22's on the left, she said, already walking away. Lock up when you're done. The vault door creaked open like it had secrets to tell. Rows of metal drawers, each one with more stories than I'd probably ever know. Box 22 was lower than I expected. I crouched, slipped in the key, and opened it with hands that felt both ice cold and burning hot. Inside, a fireproof folder. And an envelope with my name in Gran's handwriting. I sat on the concrete floor, ignoring how it bit through my jeans, and just held the envelope for a second. It was heavier than it should have been. The envelope in my hand had my name on it, Lila, written in Gran's script. I'd know that handwriting anywhere. Neat, upright, letters carefully curved like she was afraid of being misunderstood. I didn't open it right away. I just sat there, on the cold floor of that vault, trying to steady my breath. My palms were sweating. My throat was dry. When I finally peeled back the flap, the scent hit me first, paper and old perfume, a hint of lavender that had clung to her cardigans and her pillowcases. Gran scent. It made my chest ache. Inside the envelope was a letter, folded into thirds, and a second USB drive, smaller than the first. The letter was handwritten, not typed. That meant something. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was thick, smooth under my fingertips. She'd written it in black ink. Lila, if you're reading this, they've already tried. I wanted to believe. Your father would at least leave you a shred of dignity, but I've lived too long and seen too much to bet on that kind of change. What they did to you, they were planning it before I ever got sick. I tried to confront him. We had words. You know how Victor is. Cold when cornered. Elise too. She follows him like a shadow. But I never once doubted you'd come home. And I never once doubted that you'd know what to do when the time came. This box holds what they can't erase. The check is real. The trust is sealed. The records on the USB will tell you everything. You have the truth. Use it how you see fit. You don't owe them grace. But don't let them turn you into them, either. Love always. Gran. I stared at her signature for a long time. Evelyn M. Kane. My fingers brushed the edge of the cashier's check tucked into the folder. $42 300 000. Same amount as the other trust, but this one had security stamps and red seals and a note attached in her handwriting, non-negotiable. They burned the decoy. God, she knew. She knew Gran had been planning for this long before I caught on. She'd seen the way things were going, the way Elise and Dad were rewriting the family narrative, drawing the curtains around what they wanted, and pretending I was just gone. An inconvenience. There was more inside the folder, copies of old memos, board meeting notes from Kane Realty, and something else, a yellow sticky note stuck to a document labeled Asset Transfers, Draft. Trust no one, it read, especially her. No name. No context. But I knew Elise. Even after all this, I kept waiting to find a version of her that had hesitated. That had whispered, this isn't right behind closed doors. But the further I went, the more I realized how easy it had been for her to play along. To believe I didn't belong anymore. I slipped the USB into my bag and closed the box with shaky hands. My legs were stiff as I stood, and I had to lean on the metal drawer for balance. The air in the vault was too still, too cold. I felt like I was leaving something behind, but I wasn't sure what. Maybe innocence, maybe faith. Outside, the night had gone quiet. The woman at the front desk didn't say a word as I left. Just nodded once and locked the door behind me. The drive home was a blur. Red lights. Wet pavement. Headlights carving out streaks on the windshield. Back at the apartment, I didn't even take my shoes off. I dropped my keys on the counter, pulled the blinds closed, and locked the door twice. My apartment looked different now, smaller, like the walls had crept in a little while I was gone. I sat down on the couch and pulled out the second USB. It didn't have a name on it, just a strip of masking tape with a tiny heart drawn in the corner. I stared at it for a long time. Gran had drawn that. She always did that on stuff meant just for me. Birthday cards. Notes in my lunchbox when I was little. I plugged it in .1 file. A video. Play alone. Once. My hands trembled as I clicked. Gran's face filled the screen, older, frail, but alert. She was sitting in her living room, the one with the lace curtains and the dusty record player that always stuck on the same Coltrane track. Sunlight filtered in through the blinds, catching on the silver of her hair. "Lila," she said, her voice slow and sure, "if you're watching this, they've tried to bury you." She took a breath, shallow but deliberate. "I saw it coming. Your father. Elise, they don't understand what this company was supposed to be. They think Kane Realty is about power, about holding on to something that makes them feel important. But that's not why I built it. I built it for people. I built it for community. For veterans. For women who'd been pushed out. For families who were told they weren't enough." She leaned forward, closer to the camera. "You are not a mistake. Lila. You are not a burden. You are not a disappointment. You are the only one who ever saw the heart of what I made. That's why it's yours." I covered my mouth with my hand. She kept going, her voice gentler now. "They will fight dirty. They already have. But you have something they never will, truth. Don't let them twist it. And don't let them twist you." She smiled, but her eyes looked tired. "Wherever I am, I'm with you. Use what I left. Burn nothing. Prove everything." The screen went black. I sat there in the dim light of my living room, the hum of the laptop filling the silence, and just let the tears come. Not sobbing. Not loud. Just slow, steady ones. The kind that don't ask for comfort. It wasn't just money. Gran had left me a legacy. A lifeline. A map out of the silence they'd tried to leave me in, but I couldn't fight. A ghost. I had to prove I was still alive, and someone had worked very hard to make the world think I wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch, wrapped in Gran's old quilt I'd brought back from storage, listening to the rain tapping the windows like it wanted in. The USB drive was still warm on my lap, as if Gran's voice had left a bit of her behind. I clutched it like it could protect me from what I already knew was coming. Being erased wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was my legal status. The next morning, the city felt off. The streets looked the same, but I didn't. It was like I'd become transparent overnight. I could feel it in my skin. In the way the barista at the corner cafe forgot my name, even though I'd been going there for months. In the way my landlord's email bounced back when I tried to pay rent. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a paperwork error, and I knew who made me that way. I started with the county registrar's office. The place was tucked behind City Hall, smelled like carpet cleaner and bureaucratic dread. The woman at the front desk wore a name tag that said Tina and had a look on her face like she'd rather be watching paint dry. "I need to check on a death record," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady. She didn't even look up. "Name of the deceased? Lila Kane." Clicking keys. A pause. She squinted at the screen, then back at me. "That's you? Last I checked." Tina tilted her head, like maybe I was pulling a prank. Then her eyes narrowed. "You're, legally, marked deceased." "Yeah. I'd noticed." She clicked a few more times. "Court order, sealed. Came through about 2 weeks ago." "Filed by who?" She shook her head. "Can't tell you. That part's sealed. You'd need a judge to open the record." "Is there a way to contest it?" Her shoulders lifted into a half shrug. "Get a lawyer. That's all I can say." I left feeling like someone had vacuumed out the air around me. The street was still wet from the night before. The city buzzed on without me. I needed backup. So I called the one person Gran had trusted outside the family, Nora Blake. She was a lawyer who used to help Gran with small stuff, zoning permits, tenant disputes. I hadn't spoken to her in years. But I remembered her voice, sharp, low, like gravel softened by time. She picked up on the second ring. "Lila?" Her voice sounded like it had already been through 5 cases and 2 cups of coffee. "Yeah." I rubbed the side of my face. "It's a long story. Gran told me to call you. I need help." I told her everything. About the letter Dad ripped up, the trust, the forged documents, the death certificate, the vaults, the USB. I didn't hold back. She didn't interrupt. Just listened, quiet as a loaded gun. When I was done, there was a beat of silence, then, "Jesus." "Yeah. Bring everything you've got," she said. "I'm above a diner on 6th and Baker. Come now." Her office was nothing like Dad's. Lawyers. No sterile glass walls, no chrome furniture. Just clutter. Papers in stacks. Coffee rings on folders. A half-eaten bagel on her desk. It smelled like ink and burnt toast. Nora wore sweatpants and a gray hoodie. Her hair was tied up in a knot, pen behind her ear. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks, but her eyes were bright. Sit, she said, already clearing space on the table. Show me. I handed her everything, both USBs, Gran's trust paperwork, the forged docs from the Langford box, the check, the sticky notes, all of it. She spread it out like a crime scene, hands moving fast, reading with her mouth set in a hard line. This, she said, tapping the death certificate copy, is felony territory. Your father's signature is here. And Elise signed the notary block. She looked at me. You sure they didn't know you were coming back? They knew. My voice was flat. They just thought I wouldn't fight. Well, she said, grinning, they thought wrong. She picked up her phone and dialed someone named Caleb, apparently a forensic document analyst, nerd for signatures, as she called him. He's going to look at the forgery, she said. We'll need a formal affidavit. If we can prove that document is fake, and that they used it to transfer estate assets? That's wire fraud. Identity theft. We're not just talking civil court. This is criminal. My head buzzed. It was too much and not enough all at once. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to slow my breath. Do you think we can win? Nora looked up from the mess of papers and smiled like she'd just been handed a loaded slingshot. Oh honey, she said, we're gonna bury them. Caleb showed up an hour later, looking like he lived in a lab, glasses smudged, t-shirt inside out, carrying a scanner the size of a printer. He didn't waste time. Just scanned the fake document, pulled up my driver's license for comparison, and started analyzing the loops and slants. Your real signature flicks on the L, he muttered. This one doesn't. It's scanned. Probably lifted from a lease agreement or old tax form. Sloppy work. He looked up. I'll have the affidavit by tomorrow. Nora turned to me. First thing we do is get a court order to reinstate your legal identity. Once we file, the registrar has to comply. Next, we hit Kane Realty with a cease and desist, freeze their accounts before they siphon off more money. I nodded, slowly. It was hard to focus. My head felt thick, like I was watching myself from across the room. Nora must have noticed. Lila. I looked up. This isn't your fault, she said, voice gentler now. This is what powerful men do when they're scared, rewrite the story before someone else gets to tell the truth. My throat burned. I didn't cry. I didn't have it in me. But I nodded. She handed me a burner phone. No calls. No texts. Not to your dad, not Elise, no one. They'll know you're coming if you do. That night, back at my apartment, I spread out everything on my coffee table, documents, letters, the photo of me and Gran at the fair, both of us sticky with cotton candy and smiling like the world hadn't broken yet, her handwriting on the back stared up at me. You're stronger than their lies. I believed her. But believing didn't make the anger go away. They hadn't just tried to disinherit me, they tried to erase me like I was a math error. A footnote. A shadow.so. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I started digging. It was after midnight when the first text came. No name. No context. Check your mail. I stared at the screen like it might blink first. My burner phone hadn't buzzed. All day. I hadn't told anyone where I lived. Not even Nora. The hallway outside my apartment was quiet. I walked barefoot over the cold tile and opened the rusted mailbox at the bottom of the stairs. Inside, a plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name in thick black ink, Lila, the way a stranger might write it if they weren't sure how personal they wanted to get. I ripped it open on the way back up. One sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. They're moving assets tonight. Kane Realty server room. Stop them. I stopped halfway up the stairs, heart kicking hard against my ribs. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was happening now. Back inside, I paced the living room, the envelope in one hand, my breath caught somewhere between fear and fury. Who sent it? Marla? Some disillusioned assistant? A board member with a guilty conscience? It didn't matter. I called Nora. It's happening tonight, I said. Someone sent a tip. Kane Realty. Server room. They're moving money. Jesus. She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice sharpened. We don't know who sent that. It could be a trap. Or it could be real. I know. Just, don't go alone. Meet me at the Java House on Glenwood. 20 minutes. I grabbed the backpack where I'd stashed the USBs, the forged docs, everything I'd been hoarding like war rations. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and nerves. Streetlights flickered overhead, and my tires hissed against wet pavement. The coffee shop was nearly empty, just a sleepy barista wiping down counters and a couple of students hunched over laptops. Nora was already there, sipping something that smelled like scorched caramel and stress. She didn't waste time. You look like hell, she said, pulling out a chair. Good. That'll help you blend in. I slid the note across the table. She read it, frowned. We need eyes inside. Caleb can tap into the network remotely, but we'll need to be on-site in case they're wiping physical drives. She called him, and he answered on the second ring. You guys are nuts, he said. But I'll be there. We parked a block away from Kane Realty's downtown office, 8 floors of glass and steel, the kind of place Dad used to take reporters to when he wanted to look generous. I remembered the rooftop garden, the showy boardroom with the custom walnut table, the plaque in the lobby with our last name etched in brass. It looked different now. Like something rotting behind a perfect smile. We approached from the rear. The loading dock door was cracked open, propped with a brick. Caleb gave it a look like someone had left the back gate of a bank unlatched. Sloppy, he muttered. Inside, the place was quiet, lights low. The carpet still smelled like money, synthetic. Lemon and whatever floor cleaner screams respectable. The hum of the servers grew louder as we climbed to the second floor. Caleb plugged into a terminal. Someone's here, he whispered, fingers flying. They're transferring funds. My mouth went dry. To where? Offshore, he said. Cayman account. Shell company. He squinted. Name? Bright Haven. That hit me like a slap. I'd seen that name on a contract buried in one of Marla's memos. A holding firm. Fake as hell. Elise's signature had been on it. Who authorized the transfer? I asked. He paused. Elise. Logged in under her credentials. I felt like the floor shifted beneath me. Of course it was her. Quiet, polished, loyal Elise. Always standing just behind Dad like a shadow with a clipboard. She signed things without blinking. But this? This wasn't blind loyalty. This was conspiracy. Nora handed me a flash drive. Copy everything. Now. I slid it in and watched the files begin to load. Emails, logs, IP addresses, documents I didn't recognize. My eyes blurred as I scrolled past line after line of numbers, millions of dollars siphoned like water down a drain I hadn't known existed. Then I saw an email from Dad. Sent yesterday. Subject, she's back. Body, move it now or we lose. It all. They knew I was coming. And they weren't just hiding assets. They were laundering them. I felt a steady fire in my chest. Not rage, exactly. Not yet. Just something colder. Older. Gran hadn't raised me for war. But she hadn't raised me to run either. 15 minutes later, we were back in Nora's car. Caleb already decrypting the downloaded logs. His voice cut through the static of the rain. This is gold, he said. Proof they're diverting estate funds to a shell account. The logins, the transfers, Elise's digital signature. It's all here. Nora glanced at me. You want justice or revenge? I didn't hesitate. Justice. But I want it to hurt. She smiled. Then we take this to court. Fast. Back at her office, she typed like a woman possessed, drafting an emergency injunction to freeze Kane Realty's accounts. Caleb sent over his affidavit, verifying the digital trail and confirming Elise's involvement. Gran's photo sat on Nora's desk now, tucked into the corner near a coffee-stained legal pad. That picture of us at the fair, her laughing, my cheeks sticky with cotton candy. I stared at it while the printer spat out legal forms. They thought I'd stay gone. That I'd fold. That I was just a soft spot in Gran's will. Easy to erase. Easy to ignore. But I'd lived through winters in northern Japan with no heat. I'd taught classrooms full of kids who didn't speak a word of English until I looked them in the eyes and made them feel seen. I could survive this. I wasn't here to prove I was strong. I was here to prove I was still here. The courthouse smelled like old wood and fluorescent lights. The kind of place where everything felt a little off. Too cold, too quiet, like it didn't want to admit how many lives had cracked open inside its walls. I stood outside for a second longer than I needed. Hands clenched around the strap of my bag. My blazer itched at the collar. My boots were polished. Gran always said, dress like the person you're defending, and today, that person was myself. Nora met me on the courthouse steps, dressed like war in a navy pantsuit and combat boots. She probably could have worn to kick down a door. Caleb was there too, carrying a laptop and a comm that I envied. He handed me a backup USB, just in case. I slipped it into my pocket, right next to the folded photo of Gran and me at the fair. You ready? Nora asked. No nonsense, I don't think that matters. She nodded once, then led the way in. The courtroom was paneled in dark cherry wood and dimly lit by long windows that let in anemic light. At the far end sat Judge Clara Holt, a woman with steel gray hair, wire-frame glasses, and the energy of someone who'd seen 1,000 families pretend they weren't lying. Dad was already there. Of course. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than a semester at the school I'd taught at in Japan. His posture was perfect. His expression, that same stone-cold mask he'd worn my whole childhood. Next to him, Elise looked like a porcelain figurine. Perfect coat, hair pinned, eyes flickering just slightly at the corners like maybe, just maybe, she was unraveling. Their lawyer was a man named Martin Voss. Tall, glossy. The kind of guy who made misunderstanding sound like it came with A smile and free bottled water. The bailiff called the session to order. Nora stood up like she'd been waiting years for this. We're here to contest the fraudulent suppression of my client's legal identity, she said, voice even, and the unauthorized transfer of estate assets, based on forged documents and a falsified death certificate. Voss rose slowly, smoothing his tie like he was afraid of wrinkles more than consequences. Your Honor, this is a family matter. Miscommunications, at worst. My clients believed Miss Kane had abandoned her rights and her role in the family business. The estate was executed per standard protocol. Judge Holt didn't blink. I've reviewed the initial filings, she said. Let's start with the video. Nora pressed a button on her tablet, and the screen in the courtroom flickered to life. Gran's face appeared, thin but sharp-eyed, sunlight dancing behind her through the lace curtains in her living room. If you're watching this, she began, they've tried to bury Lila. They'll lie. But you've got the truth. Use it. Her voice cut through the air like a thread pulling everything tight. By the end of the clip, even the court reporter had stopped typing for a second. Elisa's hands were clenched in her lap. Dad didn't look at the screen. Didn't flinch. Nora let the silence hang a little too long. Then she handed a thick binder to the bailiff and pointed to Caleb's affidavit. We have proof of forgery, she said. A notarized death certificate with falsified information. My client's bank account was marked deceased and closed. The document includes a scanned signature lifted from a public lease. Not her real handwriting. She paused, then added. We've also recovered server logs from Kane Realty's internal systems showing offshore transfers authorized with the same forged signature. $42 million, stolen from a trust meant for Miss Kane. Judge Holt flipped through the binder, her expression unreadable. Mr. Voss, she said finally, explain why a living woman was declared dead by your clients. Voss cleared his throat. We believe it was an administrative error. I almost laughed. Out loud. Holt didn't even entertain it. An administrative error doesn't explain a notarized death certificate, forged estate transfers, and digital records pointing to deliberate concealment of funds. Nora stood straighter. Your Honor, this wasn't a mistake. This was premeditated. Fraud. Voss turned to Elise, whispering furiously. She didn't look back at him. Her face had gone pale. Nora handed over the flash drive with Caleb's analysis and the full server logs. Judge Holt nodded to the clerk. Enter into evidence. Then she looked at me. Miss Kane, she said. Do you have anything you'd like to add? I stood slowly. My voice felt caught in my throat. I looked at Dad. At Elise. And then back at the judge. I left the country to find peace, I said quietly. Not to disappear. I glanced at the folder in front of me, the one with Gran's photo tucked inside. I promised my grandmother I'd show up for this. That's the only reason I'm standing here. Not to destroy my family. Not to punish anyone. Just to be seen. Judge Holt studied me for a beat. Then she nodded once and leaned forward. This court finds credible grounds for a fraudulent death declaration, forgery, and unauthorized transfer of estate assets, she said. I am issuing an emergency freeze on all Kane Realty accounts. Pending full investigation, and immediate reinstatement of Miss Lila Kane's legal identity. The gavel hit the desk like thunder. Sharp. Final. Dad didn't say a word. He stood, face tight, and walked out of the courtroom like the air in it had turned toxic. Elise followed, slower. She didn't look back. Outside, reporters swarmed the steps, microphones and camera flashes exploding like fireworks. I kept walking, boots hitting the stone steps one after the other. Nora caught up to me, voice low in my ear. You just knocked over the first domino. I nodded, but I wasn't smiling, because I knew Dad, this wasn't over. I didn't go home after the hearing. I drove instead, to Gran's house. It still didn't feel like mine. Not really. The porch boards creaked the same way they had when I was 12 sneaking out for ice cream. The screen door stuck a little at the hinge. But inside, it smelled like lavender and old books and time. Like Gran. I sat on the porch steps, folder in my lap. The USB drives, the photo, the copy of Judge Holt's ruling, all of it laid out like a war map. The night was quiet except for cicadas and the hum of a distant train. I felt the kind of calm that only comes when the storm pauses to inhale. My phone buzzed, unknown number. Again. They're meeting tonight. Boardroom. 10 p.m. No greeting. No name. But I knew IT had to be the same person who sent me to the server room. Someone close. Someone with a conscience, or a grudge. I didn't call Nora, some things you don't ask permission for. I changed into black jeans and a hoodie, pulled my hair back, and grabbed the burner phone, the documents, and my audio recorder. I slipped the photo of Gran and me into my back pocket, like armor. Kane Realty's building loomed just as hollow and shiny as it had the first time we snuck in. But this time, I wasn't walking in blind. I parked in the same lot 2 blocks away. I knew the rhythm of the security patrols now. Knew which camera angles Caleb had looped last time. Knew where the glass could be watched through and where it could be walked through. The side door was still broken, still propped open with the same dumb brick sloppy. Still, the elevator would be tracked. So I took the stairs. 8 floors. My legs burned, but the pain kept me grounded. The boardroom door was cracked. I crouched down just outside, slid the burner phone into my jacket, audio rolling. Pressed record on the mic inside. I heard Dad's voice first. "It's not over unless we let it be," he said. "The offshore accounts are clean if we move fast." Elise replied, softer, but not uncertain, "The board's already asking questions. They saw the video. They've seen the court ruling. Someone's leaking." Then another voice. "Voss, their lawyer, we bury her in litigation. Make it too expensive, too public. She doesn't have the stomach for a drawn-out fight." There was a pause, then Dad again, low and deliberate. "She's got more of her grandmother in her than I thought." That one hit me harder than I expected. I didn't wait for more. I got what I needed. Slipped back down the stairs with the kind of caution that feels less like fear and more like purpose. I end the car. My hands shook as I sent the recording to Nora. Subject, boardroom. "They're panicking," she called within 2 minutes. "You're insane," she said. But I could hear the grin in her voice. "This is gold. It ties them directly to concealment and intent. I'm adding it to the filing." "You didn't ask if I went alone." "I didn't have to," she said. "Just get to my office." Back at Nora's, Caleb was already booting up his laptop, coffee steaming next to his scanner. He ran the audio, lined it up with the server logs, pulled voice samples from previous press clips of Dad and Elise. His analysis was fast and quiet, his fingers moving like a pianist's. "This is admissible," he said. "Tone, cadence, pattern, unmistakable. It's them." Nora leaned back in her chair, exhausted but smiling like a woman who smelled blood in the water. "We're not just freezing assets anymore," she said. "We're going for criminal charges, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy." I nodded, but I was already thinking ahead. Of the next fight. The next leak. The next time they'd try to pivot the narrative, because they would. The next morning, I woke up to a buzz and a headline: Kane Realty CEO faces criminal probe over daughter's forged death. My name wasn't in the headline. But it didn't need to be. The article referenced the court hearing, Gran's video, Marla's leaked emails, and the boardroom audio, released anonymously to a news blog that was quickly being shared across regional press networks. I didn't cry. Didn't cheer. I just sat there in Gran's kitchen, coffee going cold in my hand, reading the words like they belonged to someone else. But the last line of the article made my chest tighten. Sources close to the estate confirm Lila Kane is not only very much alive, but the intended heir to Evelyn Kane's legacy. Legacy, not money. Not property, legacy. I drove back to Nora's office. She met me on the curb, binder in hand. "The board's cracking," she said. "2 members have reached out. They want to talk. They're scared of being dragged into a criminal probe. They should be. They're willing to testify," she added. "About Victor. About Elise. They have signed memos. Emails. They say your father pressured them to approve offshore transfers." I exhaled slowly. "And Elise?" Nora hesitated. "She's not talking. Yet. We didn't need her to, not with what we had." But I couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked in court. Her hands. The way they shook. The way she avoided my eyes. There was still something there. Not guilt, maybe. But something close. Something unsteady. That afternoon, I went back to Gran's house. I found her old record player, dusted it off, and played the jazz album she used to hum while watering the porch plants. The vinyl crackled and popped like firewood. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the house empty except for memories. The USB sat on the table next to me, a copy of the server logs freshly backed up, the photo of Gran and me at the fair, now framed, rested on the windowsill. Her handwriting visible on the back. "You're stronger than their lies." I stared at it as the music played. I wasn't done fighting. Not yet, but I'd already won something they never expected me to find, myself. The hearing for the full criminal case was scheduled for September. That gave us 6 weeks. 6 weeks of depositions and subpoenas and Nora flipping through binders like a woman possessed. 6 weeks of board members tripping over each other to offer cooperation deals. 6 weeks of Caleb cataloging evidence like it was sacred text. Elise never responded to our calls. Not once, but 3 days before the indictments dropped, a package arrived at Nora's office. No note. Just my name, written in that too-perfect cursive Elise had practiced since childhood. Inside, a single key. I knew what it was for, the cabin in Asheville. I didn't tell Nora. I just drove. The roads up there were slick with pine needles and fog, winding through trees that had seen more than we ever would. The air smelled like moss and wood smoke, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was being watched. The cabin was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just taller now, less afraid of the shadows. The porch sagged a little at the corners. The windows were dusted with cobwebs. But inside, the hearth still held the scent of old cedar and dried sage. Gran used to keep jars of both by the windowsill. I lit a fire. Sat on the floor with my back against the couch and listened to the wind rake through the trees. For the first time in what felt like years, I let myself be quiet. Elise had left something else in the cabin, an envelope on the kitchen table. No name. No signature. Inside was a photo of the two of us, ages 5 and 7, sitting on the dock at Lake Juniper. I was barefoot. She had a popsicle melting down her arm. We were laughing, heads tilted together, like nothing in the world could ever split us. On the back, in tiny pencil scrawl, I hadn't meant to, that was it. No explanation. No defense. No apology, just those 4 words. It didn't make anything okay. But it didn't make her evil either. It made her human, and I hated that it cracked something in me. Not forgiveness, exactly. Just space. A tiny, painful bit of space between what she'd done and who she'd once been. Maybe that was the closest thing to peace I'd ever get from her. When I got back to Raleigh, the indictments had gone public: wire fraud, conspiracy, forgery, financial abuse. A dozen charges between Dad and Elise. Kane Realty's assets were frozen. The board had voted to remove Victor as CEO. The company would dissolve within months. I didn't go to the press. I didn't sit for interviews. I let the evidence speak. My name was reinstated in every system they'd wiped me from. I got my license back. My bank account. My signature. My body, on paper. You'd be surprised how surreal it is to receive a letter from the government confirming that you are, in fact, alive. The money from the trust? I didn't keep most of it. I started a non-profit, Evelyn House. Named for Gran. A place for women who'd been shut out of their own lives, whether by family, or debt, or quiet erasure. Legal aid. Transitional housing. Job placement. A place to rewrite your story without having to justify why you left the last chapter. Nora helped set up the paperwork. Caleb did the IT systems. The first board meeting was in Gran's living room. We passed around lemon tea and voted unanimously to approve the bylaws. I kept Gran's photo on the front desk, and I kept the key to the cabin on a string around my neck. Some days I still hear her voice in the quiet: you don't owe them grace. But don't let them turn you into them either. I didn't, and I won't, because in the end, it wasn't the inheritance that saved me. It was the knowing that I was still here, that I was still me, that surviving quietly is still surviving.